This segment is brought to you in part by the Canadian Historical Arms Society, owners of the Genesee Range, the premier recreational sport and training facility in Western Canada. See us online at historical-arms.com.
The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back. Nathan Romas with you. Today we are going to be talking about something a little more lighthearted than some of the prior topics I've had, but it's going to tie into that as well. It's going to be on conspiracy and myths, testing ideas, and challenging strongly held beliefs. For that, I have Dr. Rodney Schmaltz here. He received his PhD at the University of Alberta in 2007. He's a professor in the Department of Psychology at MacEwan University in Edmonton, Alberta, and his research focuses on pseudoscientific thinking with an emphasis on strategies to promote and teach rational skepticism. He also examines misconceptions about workplace productivity and self-control, applying the same critical lens to popular but unsubstantiated claims about performance and motivation. In both domains, his work emphasizes the importance of evidence-based reasoning and the need to distinguish scientific findings from widely held yet unsupported beliefs. Man, this is gonna be an interesting conversation. In 2019, he was the recipient of the Distinguished Teaching Award, one of the highest honors at MacEwan University, and his work aims to improve scientific literacy in both academic and public settings. So using research-based strategies to help people separate good information from bad. This is a critical time for that. Welcome to you, Professor Schmaltz.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Man, so many points in the bio we're going to have to get to because this is a lot of stuff that is, I think, missing from a lot of the conversations that happen nowadays. People like to scream and shout and miss all the critical and critiquing pieces of things. But we'll start with talking a bit about yourself, how you got into this field of psychology. What are your interests, and how you got into this specific topic of scientific skepticism, I guess we could call it.
Well, my training is in social psychology. And as a social psychologist, what you're trying to do is create a social reality in the lab. And it's really, really hard. So we're trying to study things like, attraction, aggression, and so on very broadly. So if you're going to bring that into a lab setting and test it empirically, it's really tough. So I'm very solid in research methodology. I really understand how to do these types of tests. So earlier in my career, when I would see things like, this place is haunted, I'm like, that's cool. What's the evidence? And understanding how to test, there's no evidence. And you'd see that with a lot of extraordinary claims. So you'd approach them like, well, that's really interesting. If that's true, how was it tested? And then you see that the test either wasn't there or that the testing was poor. So that got me more and more interested in it. And then the shift became more so into why people believe these things. So there's a lot of things out there that don't have a lot of evidence, but people believe deeply in it. And I became really interested as to why that might be. But on top of that, I became really interested in how to help people maybe be a bit better when they're discerning good information from bad. And then I brought that into my classes to try to help students become better critical thinkers.
Yeah. Did you have any particular people or maybe even had certain books you read that led you in this direction? Because I think a lot of people have fun with it, but to do it as a career, to actually dig into stuff and go, how do I prove, disprove? How do I teach people to do this? What led you to that specifically?
It was a professor I had who I actually was lucky enough to work with in my grad degree. So he was my PhD supervisor.
Okay.
Some of his early research looking at magical thinking.
Okay.
So he would do things like have people photocopy their hands and then they'd have to build a model. But for some people, he would take that photocopy of their hands and then use a paper cutter and cut off the fingers. Just the photocopy, not real fingers. And when they built the model, they were slower. So it was little things like that. Really? And he had another really interesting study, and it was on gambling. And what he did is he had people come into the lab and he gave them real money. And then they're allowed to gamble, and they spun a roulette wheel. And the only thing he changed in the study is some people just picked a number, and it was out of a basket of lottery balls, so balls with numbers on them. So some people just pick one, put it back. Or other people would pick one and they're allowed to hold on to it. And if you're allowed to hold on to your number, you bet more. And it was because people felt like they had more control then. And that led me to look at other studies. So it's the same thing with lottery tickets. If you're allowed to pick your own lottery ticket, it's more valuable to you. Even though, of course, it's chance. But if you pick it, people feel like they have this sense of control. So that's kind of where things started for me. And then I started to look deeper and more broadly into pseudoscientific claims and so on, and really try to understand kind of the processes behind why things like this happen.
That makes me think of when I worked at Superstore long time ago. We're going way back. And, they have the lottery kiosk there and people can get the scratch tickets and their lotto tickets and stuff. You would actually, so if I was in that area, I remember hearing people, they would specifically be picking something that comes in a package. Like they had some insight that, the 5 packages in front of them, I want the 1 second from the left. Like people were that specific when they came in to just the grocery store and wanted something. It's like, but that's just randomized, like the pack. There's nothing, there's no difference between them. So it was very interesting. I guess it kind of runs along those lines.
Yeah. It's this illusion of control that we have. We feel like we're in control of events that are really random or chance. And the way our brains are hardwired, we all fall prey to this. So what's really interesting about the area I studied has nothing to do with IQ. So there's a lot of people who are extremely intelligent that believe some things that aren't supported by good evidence. And the reason why, or one of the reasons why, it's complex, but one of the reasons is that people with a high IQ are really good at defending their position, but they're not great at hearing counter arguments. So people who are very intelligent, and that concept, I suppose, is a bit fuzzy, but who say people who score high in intelligence test, they're very good at coming up with arguments to defend their position. But again, they just don't hear that counter argument because they're so good at defending what they already believe. So when you hear people that believe things that seem a bit strange, I think there might be an assumption that perhaps it has something to do with intelligence, and it's kind of the opposite. So I think it makes us a little bit more, empathetic towards people that have these beliefs. It's not that it's IQ or anything per se; it's just that they're very good at defending them. And kind of the way our brains are hardwired, I think we can all very easily fall prey to different pseudoscientific beliefs.
That makes me think of a conversation I had with someone, this would be a few months ago. It was on some current issues. I'll leave it at that. But because we don't need to get into like specific things like that. But it was on some current issues. And they were saying that, well, I deal with this client in this situation and they have like 6 degrees and they believe this, or they say these things. So I think they couldn't possibly be wrong about it. And that's interesting now hearing what you're saying, because I go, well, just because they have a degree, doesn't mean they know, whatever field they were talking about, that's true. But I guess on the opposite end, so they're not good at hearing opposing views. And is there a reason for that? Like we believe that somebody can just, oh, you have degrees, therefore you're smart, whatever you say should be right. But if you can't actually take in the opposite view, then how have you ever really rationalized that to yourself? How have you critically analyzed it? So is there something missing there, or is there like a certain skill you need to be able to listen to what other people have to say and take that in and kind of blend it with what you have?
Yeah, there's a lot there. One thing you're referring to is this appeal to authority. So that's one of the characteristics of pseudoscientific belief too. So we tend to default to experts. And a lot of the time that's not bad. But when you get experts that go beyond their field, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yes.
So you'll get an expert that, is trained in physics, but they're commenting on health. It's like, well, you don't have expertise in that. So a good researcher or a good scientist won't do that. But you'll get some people that perhaps are, maybe they're just not aware that they're doing it, or there's some that are definitely ethically questionable. They're going far beyond what their degree is, right?
Or they justify, like they go, well,
yeah.
I've slightly dabbled in this and it's come across.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. And the other thing too is that once you start to believe some of these things, it's really powerful because you might get a social circle around it, so a lot of people who share similar beliefs. And like I say, with the way our brains are hardwired, there's something known as confirmation bias. So what we do is we seek out information that confirms our beliefs. And if we come across information that doesn't, we tend to ignore it or dismiss it.
Mhm.
And it's really powerful. So when we find things that we agree with, especially the stuff that's value laden we really care about, we actually get a little dopamine hit. And dopamine's a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure. So it makes us feel good. So it's incredibly reinforcing. So I think what we need to do is really start training kind of the scientific skepticism, or maybe a little bit more broadly, critical thinking earlier with younger students. And I actually wrote a short paper on this. And I think the problem might be is that, so we're teaching critical thinking in schools, but that term has become so broad, it can mean almost anything.
Yeah.
I've looked at some school programs and they're teaching like some things in math and they're calling it critical thinking. What they're teaching was great, but I'm like, well, it's not really critical thinking that I would define as critical thinking. So I think if we looked at it more in terms of something like scientific skepticism, where we understand how science works, I think we should be teaching that as soon as we teach kids what science is. So you learn what science is, and then you learn how to become a consumer of information. And I just don't think we a lot of that, especially in junior high and high school. I think universities are better, but there's still not a lot of courses devoted to that. So I have a course where I focus on that. And I was an author on introductory textbooks. So we put an emphasis on that. But if you think about it, if you take a class on chemistry, the focus is just on chemistry. You're not thinking about those broader, more scientific ideas necessarily. So I don't think it's necessarily the fault of the instructors or institutions. It's just that, if your job is to teach physics, you teach physics, right? But I think we need to take that step back and say, okay, how does this apply to the real world? How are we helping people determine misinformation from solid information and so on? So there's a lot there. I mean, the odds are certainly stacked against us, again, just in the way we're hardwired. But I do think that if we had education in how to think like a scientist earlier, that would certainly help. And the research supports that too. I mean, once you believe in something like conspiracy theory, really, really hard to get people to change their minds.
Yeah.
But give them information before they're exposed to those theories, then you've got a good chance of them being a lot more critical when they come across that information.
Well, when you're talking about like the dopamine hit, are we kind of going in the direction of, I'm going to say it's laziness because I don't know a better word. Maybe you have a more scientific way of explaining it, but are we just getting lazy at examining stuff? And if we're just getting the dopamine from a very short interaction or taking in some information, as opposed to critical thinking where, okay, now I might actually have to use brain power and think about this for 5 minutes or 24 hours or whatever it is. Are people moving away from that? Is it avoiding hard work, not physically, but mentally?
I don't think so. So we're all cognitive misers. And what that means is that we don't like to expend a lot of energy thinking. And it's not a form of laziness. It's just that we only have so much attention, right?
Okay.
So a lot of the time we're kind of on autopilot. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. So we'll rely on heuristics, these rules of thumb. And for the most part, they work pretty good, but they can lead us astray. Because I mean, if you're going to think about everything and research everything you come across, when you shut down, there's just not time.
Yeah.
Even if you look at health, you go to the doctor and they tell you things like, do you have time to go research exactly what they said and verify it being true? Well, the vast majority of people don't. And on top of that, I mean, are you going to access the medical databases, read those articles? Probably not. So I don't think it's laziness per se. Again, it's kind of the way our brains work. And I mean, we have access to more information now than we ever had before, but we don't have the training to kind of, figure out how to deal with that information and then how to really determine which information we should maybe be putting more time into and maybe spending a little bit more of that cognitive energy on. And again, I think that comes down to education. I think we can get there. I just don't think that it's built into our education system yet because it's also new, right? I mean, you look at social media, that's what, 20-ish years old, something like that. So relatively new. And then, just that everybody has a phone in their pocket now, they have access to all this information. I think we really need to put a lot of focus on how to help people figure out if information is good or bad.
Well, I would say a lot of the people I deal with at work apparently have read every book in criminal code and statute and everything because they always like to tell me how to do my job, even though I know they're wrong. But yeah, to say maybe we have a different experience on that end of things. One of the things I do want to go back to, though, you brought up like the group dynamic. So somebody can have an idea, but then they kind of get reinforced when they're in those social groups. There was one thing I was wondering about because, at some point, you keep expanding your group. You're going to get somebody in there that has a differing opinion or different idea. So is it enough to have one person in a group come out and call something out? Or, if the idea is strongly held enough, everyone's just going to be like, nope, you go. We're all right. You couldn't possibly be right because you're the one. What kind of dynamics do you see around that?
It's complicated. So what will happen if you've got one person in a group that dissents? What the group will do, and these are based on studies that are smaller groups. So we're looking at, 4 to 5 people and so on. But I think we can extrapolate a bit. But what the group tends to do is they'll put all their attention on that person to see if they can get them to kind of fall into place, right? Mm. And if they don't, then they usually get excluded from the group. But there's also some research showing that if you get this kind of minority perspective, so one person that has this dissenting view, it might not lead to public compliance, but it could lead to private compliance. Not like, well, I don't want to distance myself from my social group or my friends, but that was an interesting idea. So I think it's important when people have these differing views to state them. And then you hope that others join in as well. So when you have like a few people starting to have the same ideas, then that can be really impactful. But even as that one individual, it might not seem like you're having an impact in the moment. And that might be because it's that private acceptance or that private, deliberation about what somebody said. So it's not that there's a perfect answer to that. It's really complex, but kind of in a nutshell, that's generally how it works.
Yeah. I guess I might equate it to politics in some sense where you get one or two people have very different view of what the rest of the group has. And it's like, well, they're either going to fall in line or going to replace you type thing. Yeah. So it's like not a lot of wiggle room to dissent from the party.
Politics, absolutely. That can definitely be the case. So what I was talking about was more the research, more in social groups. But if you look at political, again, that there's that added layer of complexity.
Yeah. Okay. So on beliefs themselves, can you tell us how people form these and how something becomes so strongly held? Like what leads a person to really call it? Maybe as would an opinion be like the start of it, and then that turns into a belief?
Yeah, it's especially powerful when we're looking at those value-laden attitudes. So when you're talking about politics, religion, things of that nature, it gets really, really strong. And the formation usually starts early, right? So you hear some ideas, they're supported socially, and really any idea you come up with now, you can go online and find support for it. Almost anything. So you start looking more at that, you find others who support you. That's going to lead to kind of, growing that social circle. And I think it becomes incredibly hard then. And then what happens is if you've got this one unusual belief, that's going to inform your other beliefs, right?
Okay.
So it's hard to change one belief. So if you believe that people can see the future, for example, then that's going to change the way you view a lot of things. So that should lead to, at least in some form, a bit of a distrust in science because there's been no evidence whatsoever that can be true. And so it's hard to change that one belief because your whole belief system is changing now, right?
So it's like a trickle-down effect. You change one thing, now your whole reality is kind of starting to crumble.
That's it. And I mean, if you look at it in terms of, maintaining self-esteem, that feels really bad. It means I'm wrong about everything. And nobody likes to feel that way. Yeah. So instead, we'll go try to find more evidence to support our views. I mean, one way to overcome it, really hard when somebody has a really strongly held belief. But basically what you're doing, if you're telling them, okay, what you believe is wrong, you've created this cognitive gap. And what you need to do is fill it with some good information. But if you're doing it just with straight data, people are going to ignore it because, one, we're not good at working with numbers and stats and data. So it's very easy to ignore. And again, like you say, it's kind of that web just kind of falls apart, right? We don't want that to happen. So it's really, really difficult. Again, when you have those strong views, the really strong conspiratorial views or anything really value laden, extremely tough to change those opinions.
So on that kind of idea, filling the gap with data. I'm wondering, so when I'm just going to use this as an example, not asking for political views on this, but we, on law enforcement intelligence side, we would see things like you have the conflict with Israel and Palestine, and lots of videos out there that come out. You get 10-second clips of a building blown up and people everywhere. Well, people take that video and I think they fill those gaps that you're talking about. If I'm understanding it correctly, they'll fill it with little seconds of clips. But then you can find out later on down the road, it's like, well, that clip was actually from a war like 5 years prior in the country next door or something. So it's like people aren't taking that second to be critical, to examine things. So, is it like, how do we take those little bits of things and just keep reinforcing what we're believing? But then you're kind of saying like, well, data, we're not good with the data. So is it purely a numbers thing? Is it like numbers versus video? Or is it just, well, I just want to take in what I believe at the end of the day?
It's a couple things. So let's say you watch one of these videos and then later you learn that the video was from a different war or was faked or whatever it might be. But you've watched the video and now you believe this. So you're going to start looking for evidence that supports this. So when you learn that the video wasn't real, you're like, okay, well, that might not be real, but you've come up with all these other arguments to support the thing that wasn't real already.
Yeah.
So you take out that little element, which is now a small, I'm like, well, but I still believe all these other things. So that might not be real, but those beliefs were informed by the thing that was inaccurate. So that gets really hard. So, I mean, one of the ways to look at it is, so I've been talking a little bit about, how our brain works, right? So there's something known as the availability heuristic. And we tend to remember things that are emotionally charged, and then we'll make estimates based on that. So a really simple example, if you learn about a plane crash and you're about to fly, you're probably going to be uncomfortable. But statistically, flying is incredibly safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's on your mind is the plane crash because it's so dramatic. So those are the types of things we remember, and then that leads us to change how we estimate the likelihood of future events. So these things that are really powerful and available. So like I say, I study a lot of why people believe in pseudoscience. So things that seem scientific but aren't. And pseudoscience uses a lot of anecdotal evidence, but it's quite powerful. So, I had a friend who was cured of X because of whatever. So that means a lot to people. We respond well to stories. So I think as scientists, we need to become better storytellers. So we can still infuse the data and we make sure what we're saying is accurate, but we need to do it in a way that people are going to remember it and it's impactful. I think we're getting better at it as a whole, but there's still a ways to go.
I feel like people are just so easy to trick. Like at the end of the day, we can put out short clips as long as there's lots of drama. As long as it's emotionally charged and it speaks to, like you're saying, like some of those values, the strongly held things, we're just kind of, I don't know if it's wired to just go down those roads. And how do we get that critical thinking, I guess in the actual sense of the term, how do we get that back into the school? Is when I deal with a lot of people in my work, I always say, like, the reason I'm dealing with you is because other systems have failed you before you got to me. So that's health, that's education, that's the family system. There's a whole bunch of stuff that comes up. Talking specifically about the education piece, and you've mentioned it a few times, how do we teach more of this critical thinking? Like, what would maybe a best course look like? Like, how do we teach it at the younger ages to people? And then how do we teach it at the university ages?
Right. So you said that we're easily tricked. And well, I don't think so.
Okay.
So again, it's that idea that we're cognitive minds. We just can't pay attention to everything. I haven't seen any research supporting this directly, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think if you look historically, even when you watch the news for the most part used to be accurate, right? Generally. But now it's all skewed, especially with the 24-hour news channels. They take it's turned into entertainment. But I think our brains are still kind of wired like, well, that must be true. We don't realize that, it's being skewed this much. And of course, people are more aware of it, but I think we kind of default to believing people. So I think that does make it easier. And again, it's that matter of, do you have the time to go fact check everything? So if we take it back to education, if you understand what some of the hallmarks of like pseudoscience or bad scientific thinking are, then you can be a little bit quicker to go, okay, wait, that doesn't sound right. So even if you don't go and explore more, I'm not going to accept that claim right off the bat. So to do that, I think we need to make the education really interesting, because we need to kind of combat, when people are spreading misinformation, you can kind of make stuff up.
Yeah.
And I don't know, some people might not believe, but you can make it pretty interesting. So I've actually done some research in schools. Haven't published this yet. It's hard to get enough students to do this work. But what I was trying to do is validate some demonstrations that would get kids engaged. I was using things like magic tricks. And I'm doing some follow-ups on this now, just to show people how easily they can be fooled. So you're not targeting one area per se. You're not saying like, okay, Bigfoot doesn't exist and here's why. Instead, you're like, look, it's pretty easy to fool people sometimes. And this is how I did that trick. And then you generalize that more. So something, and something that, if you're looking at young age, something simple that kids can do and they can show other people. So they're excited to share it. And then at the higher level at universities, what I do is I try to make things as engaging as possible. So as an example, I take my students on a ghost hunt every year for my science class. Yeah. So we pick a supposedly haunted location in Edmonton, and we basically use the same techniques as the ghost hunters you find online or on TV. And then we kind of debunk them. So we show what they would say is a sign of a ghost. We're like, well, here's probably a better explanation.
Yeah.
We're not saying there can't be ghosts, but there's always seems to be a much better rational explanation. And that's the type of thinking you want to encourage.
Okay. You know what? I would say even within the course, like if you're just having those discussions, the discussions alone are something that seem to be missing from most things you see in public. Like politicians, we don't see them having a nice conversation or even a nice debate. It's usually pretty, the rhetoric's pretty, I don't know, I'll say mean spirited a lot of the time. And it's like, well, I mean, you're the ones who are supposed to set the example for a lot of the people. So if they're doing that, then it kind of comes down from there. What about, when we were bringing up misinformation, I'm wondering, what do you tell students, especially nowadays because they have phones and everything else available to them? How do you avoid misinformation or stop themselves from going down certain rabbit holes, just sitting there flipping through the short clips on Instagram or YouTube and going off on these wild tangents? Like, is there some sort of advice that you give them when they're maybe doing that?
Well, I give them a lot of the things to look for that should make them be more critical. Again, using that term maybe a little bit more directly.
Yeah.
And so if you hear of, I don't know, again, we can use psychic powers as just an easy example to talk about. Then just ask the next question, okay, how do they test it? How do we know? I mean, as another example, horoscopes are becoming popular again, especially among younger people.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, which is really interesting. And there's absolutely no evidence that the stars predict our future. There's none. And here's the way to test it. It's so simple. So what researchers did, they had people come into the lab, they looked at their horoscope, then asked how accurate it was. So I'm a Taurus, I'd read Taurus, and then, out of a scale of 5, I'd say, yeah, it's pretty accurate. Then what they did, is got another group of people, same horoscopes, but they took out the name of the sign. So it's just a bunch of paragraphs. And they said, okay, pick yours. Now, if there's any validity, you should pick your horoscope, right?
Yeah.
And of course, perform your chance. Because the way horoscopes are written, every horoscope will apply to you, just general terms. So when you give little examples like that, like, oh, I see. So now horoscopes are kind of debunked. But kind of like we said, when you believe something strongly that's misinformation, there's this trickle-down effect. What you hope is that the opposite is true as well. It's like, well, horoscopes don't seem that accurate. Okay, let's take the next step. Can people read minds and that kind of idea? And in the class, what I do is I teach them how to become psychics.
Okay.
So I show them the psychics, and it takes 45 minutes. You'll be pretty good. You'll
really?
not. Oh yeah. It's not hard. So it's about there's a technique called cold reading. So you look at a person and you can make some judgments about them. So little things, are they wearing a ring or not? If they have a ring, they're married. You know that about them, and then you basically ask them a lot of questions. And the other technique, thought reading, you just go online and see how much you can learn about them. And then once the students do this, and again, it's literally 45 minutes, they kind of don't believe in psychic powers anymore.
Yeah.
Now, again, it doesn't explain every psychic ever, and perhaps there's exceptions, but explain the most of them. So
It makes me think of the ghost beginning of Ghostbusters when he's doing the
yeah,
testing and he's got the electronic dial and the guy's supposed to guess the card.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
I don't recommend those type of tests. I'm just saying. I saw it in a movie once. All right. Well, one of the things I also wanted to ask you about was because we already spoke about teaching to have like a critical eye and a critical mind for things. Is there a best way to address someone in the moment? So if now you're kind of on the outside of it, you see somebody with a very strongly held belief or opinion, and how do you have a conversation with someone like that? How do you address maybe inaccuracies in what they're saying? Or if they're flat out wrong, like how would you bring that up with somebody?
It's tough. Usually, what happens in these cases is people start to argue. And as soon as that happens, basically, both people arguing will believe stronger in their own views because they're just looking to defend what they're saying, right? So they believe stronger and they probably like the other person less.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that's from an argument. So I think all we can do, especially when it's a strongly held belief, is you can ask questions like, I haven't heard that. So where did you get that information? But you have to do it in a spirit of genuine curiosity because, I mean,
Yeah.
I always like to think maybe that's true, but where did you learn that? And what you can do too is give them some resources. Like, well, from what I've read or what I've seen, I haven't heard that. If you're interested, I can send you some things. But if they're not interested, then you just have to let it go. And I don't think in like a single shot you're going to change anyone's mind. It's almost impossible. But you might give them a little bit to think about. And the key is to be really respectful. So I think when I teach it and talk about how IQ has nothing to do with this, it really helps people again become a little bit more empathetic in the sense that it's like, well, this person might be incredibly intelligent, but they for some reason believe this thing that doesn't have any evidence. What can I do to help understand why they believe this? And when you're kind of coming from that perspective, then at least you can have a conversation.
Yeah.
Rather than be like, you're wrong, that's ridiculous, here's the data, then people they just dismiss that out of hand. And they'll in fact believe stronger in that misinformation because they've been threatened.
Yeah, it's when you see people who can have an opposing view but still have friends that are of a different view, a different political party, whatever it might be. I mean, those are the people that I think are the ones that can be spoken to. They sway in certain areas from side to side with different evidence or from having just those conversations, and that's good. That's what you need. It's like you can only give a person so much latitude, and you're like, hey, I don't know if that's right, and here's some evidence, or maybe we'll talk about it. But at a certain point, it's like, okay, they believe what they believe, and there is no changing their mind. Outside of maybe some crazy incident happening to them or some revelation, right? It's going to be some big thing that might change them in the end. But I think, we need to have more of those conversations with the middle ground, right? And I think most people would fall into that, like talking political side of things. It's people are generally in the middle and they might be a little more left, a little more right. And that's where the majority would fall. It's more rare, even though this is all you see in the news sometimes, but it's more of a rarity that you see people at the extremes. I think that still holds true. Maybe you have better numbers on this.
No, that's exactly right. There's some research showing just that for the most part, we're pretty close in the middle. So you're right. People might lean a little bit more right or a little bit more left, but the extremes are quite rare. Unfortunately, as you pointed out, that's what we see in the media. And the reason we see in the media is because it's more interesting.
Yeah.
So that's what people will watch or click on or whatever it might be. Which again, with that availability heuristic, then you think, okay, everybody who's right or everybody who's left is like this, when in fact you're just getting people who are on the extreme, and the vast majority of people are quite similar.
So one of the things I'm wondering about too, and we talked about this with some of the testing, is can you see or do you know of, is there certain traits, characteristics, type of person that is more susceptible to misinformation or going down certain rabbit holes and believing things? Like, I mean, if I could just see them on the street and stay away from that, that'd be the best case scenario. But is there a certain thing going on inside that makes a person kind of go down these paths?
Well, there are some personality traits that are associated with susceptibility to misinformation. But I think for the most part, we all can be. So I've done a little bit of research on things like there's a personality variable called need for cognition. And all that means is people who enjoy the act of thinking. It's a little bit more complex than that, but that's basically it. So that'd be somebody who likes things like chess and so on. They're going to be a little bit less susceptible to misinformation because they enjoy thinking and they enjoy the challenge of working through those problems. So we'll find those variables, but I think it's really more of a sliding scale. So I think it was researcher Mick West. He said, in terms of things like conspiracies, we probably all fit somewhere on a scale. So there's people that might say, okay, I don't think 9/11 was an inside job, but maybe the government knows more than they're letting on. So that'd be kind of the low end of the scale.
Mm-hmm.
Those people, you can probably change minds. But then you've got people at the top of the scale that believe that every world leader is half reptile and that the reptilians are like those minds are probably not going to change, or it's going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah.
But most people aren't on that high end, right? So there are some personality variables. When you get to that really high end, there could be some psychological issues as well. But you don't like to overgeneralize like that because we can all fall prey to some forms of misinformation. And I think we all do. And the reason why, again, is we're cognitive misers. We can't, do research on everything. At some point, we have to trust some of the information that we're getting. And again, just the way we're hardwired, that can lead to some mistakes.
Can you explain, and I should have asked this earlier, can you just explain cognitive miser? Because I kind of have an idea of what it means, but to get it like an actual definition.
Yeah, basically all it means kind of is that we don't like to expend a lot of energy thinking. So a lot of the time we're on autopilot. So when I share this example with my class, I'll say, okay, when you came to class on day one, you walked in, you sat down, you took out your notebook, you did that all without thinking. That's good. So imagine if we had to think, okay, walk into a room like, okay, now what? Okay, those look like chairs. I should probably sit at the chair. Like we just shut down, right?
Yeah.
We're bombarded by information constantly. But then when you're writing an exam, you're flipping to this almost different type of thinking. It's system one, system two thinking. So, there's times where we think really intently, whereas other times we're more on autopilot. But when we think really intently or think hard, it's taxing. So the reason we're cognitive misers is because we need to save that energy. And again, that's a bit of a simplistic way to look at it, but essentially we can't be thinking hard all of the time. We're just not built to do that, right?
Yeah.
So that's it. So we talk about being a cognitive miser. Again, it's not that people are unintelligent or they're gullible. It's just that we don't want to expend all of that energy thinking all of the time, especially when we don't have to. And for the most part, works pretty good, but can lead us astray.
Is there a way to increase someone's capacity to think? So if we want people to be a critical thinker, to actually examine things more intently or with more interest, is there a way to expand that? Like if I just get student A who comes into my class and I say, hey, you should do all these things, steps A, B, and C, when you see this piece of information, that doesn't necessarily increase their capacity.
Right.
And I guess is that, I don't even know if it's brain capacity or energy capacity, but I just imagine like their head starts glowing red.
It's not quite that dramatic.
Yeah.
I think being aware of what to look for helps a lot. So I'll just give you an example. So there's something known as the fundamental attribution error, and it's called fundamental because we all do it. So when we see someone acting, we assume it's something about them. And what we do is we ignore the situation. So as an example, the last time you're driving, you get cut off, you think that the person who cut you off is a number of things. They're a terrible person, they're a terrible driver, you get really angry. But you don't know what their situation is. Maybe it's an emergency, maybe it's a medical emergency, maybe, there's something, a crisis. We don't think about the situation. So whenever we see someone acting, we think it's them. So if you're at a restaurant and the server is rude, you're like, that person is awful.
Yeah.
I'm never coming back. Don't take into account, maybe they're just dealing with somebody that wasn't nice to them. Maybe it's really busy. So we ignore the situation. Now, how do you overcome that? It's so hardwired that it happens automatically. But if people know about the fundamental attribution error, then they're more likely not to fall prey to it. So you see someone doing something like, oh, that person's a jerk. Like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe something else is going on. So it doesn't take that much more cognitive energy, but it does mean that you have to understand these things, just be aware of them. So if you just explain these types of things, so you hope that people kind of catch it. You're like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, wait a minute. That seems like a hallmark of pseudoscience or misinformation or something. So I think it's a matter of having those tools there. And I think a lot of people just don't have them. And again, nothing to do with intelligence. We haven't been trained how to do it. And I think that's, again, where that younger education really comes in. And that's where it becomes critical that we have students able to kind of, again, discern that good information from bad.
I didn't know what to call it, the fundamental attribution error, but everything you described there. So that's something that I've started to kind of incorporate into a lot of the policing. So when I go and deal with people, and not that I had an anger issue, but I'm just saying it made me a lot less angry when dealing with people, and it makes you a little more patient to not just snap to judgment about somebody. So you take a second to just go, okay, maybe their day is crappy and their life sucks, and this is why they're acting like this. And I see that in some of the interactions I have where I see other officers right away. It's starting with the argument, and I go like, look at that person's life. Like, if they want to scream and shout all day, like whatever. I'm going home and I have a good life that I work hard for, and I'm doing all these different things. Do I need to make all these judgments right here? And it leads to bad decisions. And then I'm, saying something or doing something that gets me a complaint. So yeah, that's definitely something like even not just student wise, but it's adults could learn a lot from that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's great that you're doing that, but it's hard, right? You really have to catch yourself like, okay,
yes,
step back, and then move into it. So you almost need to kind of mentally prepare before you go into these situations. Like, and take that step back, because especially when you're under stress and you're tired, it's very easy to default to that. And it's just human nature, right? So you'll still get that if you're angry, you'll still get that charge, and then you can step back and go, okay, just like you're saying, maybe it's the situation. I don't know what else is going on here. Let's try to approach this and maybe a bit more, I suppose rational is a bit strong, but in that manner, I'm going to be a bit more objective about what's happening, which is hard to do. Somebody is, right in your face, or somebody's doing something that, is clearly wrong.
Yeah. I think a lot of the stuff that, especially in policing world, it just comes down to having, there's a discipline aspect, and then there's just realizing that, if it's not physically threatened with anything, which is generally the biggest threat, you can bring a lot of things down and react appropriately to them. And, it's, again, this is something that I think police officers could even learn from. So why we're having this conversation today. You know what? Because we're coming near the end of the time, I did want to hear a few things because we've had discussions before this. Tell us about some of the crazy studies that you've done, because you've had some wild ones, and I really liked some of the ones that you were describing to me. But
Sure.
yeah, if you want to tell us about some of the things that people have come in with claiming that they can do and how you tested them.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll tell you about a couple things. So some of the research I've done, I'm interested again in why people believe in unusual things. So I did some research looking at something called infrasound. And infrasound is a low frequency sound below 18 hertz. So you can feel it, but you can't really hear it. So imagine you're at a concert that's really loud and there's a lot of bass. You can kind of feel it in your chest and the hair on the back of your neck goes up. Now imagine you had those experiences but can't hear anything. Infrasound is caused by things like low rumbling pipes. It can be caused by a lot of traffic. It's kind of everywhere. And if you look at haunted houses, they tend to be old buildings, which tend to have low rumbling pipes and a lot of the things that could cause infrasound.
Okay.
So imagine being a person, you walk into an old building, it's dark, it's kind of breezy, it's creepy, and then all of a sudden the hair on the back of your neck goes up and you feel some tension. Well, to default to ghosts is actually quite reasonable, right? Because most people don't know what infrasound is. So what I wanted to do was some research to see if infrasound actually generated a stronger fear response. And I did this by using Edmonton as the base for the research.
Yeah.
For those who aren't familiar with Edmonton, it's a commercial haunted house and it's absolutely fantastic. It's Hollywood level special effects. It's great. So when Edmonton was on Jasper Ave in the Paramount Theater, we brought people in when it wasn't running, so they weren't actors there or anything, and people knew what they were doing. We brought volunteers in, and sometimes infrasound would be playing, and sometimes it wouldn't be. And then we had GoPro cameras on them. We tracked heart rate and a bunch of measures. Now, so we basically followed people around Edmonton and exposed them to infrasound or not. And that research was tough because there's so much going on. But what we did find was that people who were exposed to infrasound went through faster.
Oh, okay.
So interesting, but it's not a lot, right? Some of our other measures just kind of fell through. The heart rate monitors weren't as accurate as we hoped. So we brought it into the lab. And what we did is we had people listen to either calming music or kind of spooky music in the presence of infrasound or not. And then we measured cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone. And what we found is that when the infrasound was on, the cortisol levels went up.
Okay.
So there was this stress hormone response, which was really cool. So we're doing some more work on that. We're following that up, and hopefully we'll be able to get a little bit farther. But that work is actually under review right now in a journal. So hopefully that'll be out shortly. Now in the classroom, I partnered with a group called the Center for Inquiry Investigations Group. And they offer $500,000 to anyone that can show paranormal abilities under carefully controlled conditions, basically using the scientific method. So they get hundreds of applicants a year. They work with the applicant to find a test that both agree is fair, both the CFIIG is fair and the applicant think is fair. So my class for the past couple of years has been designing the protocols for these tests. So we've worked with 20 applicants so far. And the applications we've had are things like prophetic dreaming, so people can dream the future. We've had several cases of psychic abilities and so on. And as we work with them, a lot of people kind of drop out or they just don't actually follow through at the test. But we tested 3 and we did it over Zoom. And the ones we tested, one person claimed they could control smoke. So they said if there's smoke, they can make it go straight up and up to 8 feet in the air. So what we did is we had them have 2 incense sticks and they lit both of them. And then we rolled a die, so it was random, and say, okay, now make the right one go up. And they had to concentrate on it. And so that they couldn't get it done. So that test was a failure. Another one we tested, the person claimed that they could telepathically touch people. So the way this was going to work is that over Zoom, we had one of our students standing and they had their hands out. So their hands off to the side like they're going to shake a hand.
Okay.
And then they rolled dice, so it would be random. And then we basically told them, okay, shake their left hand or their right hand. And then the student would report if they felt anything. And they didn't. So that test was a failure as well. So there's no telepathic touching. And the last test we did was a person who claimed they could control clouds with their mind. So we loaded up 10 webcams of cloudy places in North America, and they had 2 hours. And what they said they could do in 2 hours is not just move the clouds, but it would completely clear. So the clouds would be gone.
So there's Storm from X-Men.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, like a very slow storm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would not be great in an X-Men film, but so we watched for an hour 45, and then the person said they were having a bad day and they gave up. But what was really interesting about this is all of the applicants, extremely nice. They really believed they could do it. They were genuinely disappointed when they couldn't, and they all wanted to try again. So it was interesting because, again, we want to be empathetic. So we weren't, poking fun at people that believe this, but let's see if these claims are real. And the people were extremely nice. They thanked us for the time. It was really interesting. That was a great experience for the students too, just to see that, when people believe this, it's not a reflection of who they are. We don't know why they came to these things. And after the tests, it didn't really seem to impact them too much. So they all came up with reasons why it didn't work. And they really felt that it didn't necessarily reflect their abilities. Instead, it was just, a bad day or conditions weren't right or whatever it might be. So really interesting stuff. We're doing it again next year. So we'll see what we're going to test.
Well, and how do you control for things like, I would say, mental health? If anyone comes in on any substances, I guess those would be the first questions I would be asking.
Yeah.
Depending what they claim.
So I talked to the group. The person I worked with is Stan West and Randy Westendorf, and I asked that question, like, okay, well, what if somebody's suffering from psychological problems or whatever it might be? And they said, we still test them because maybe that is a part of disability. So perhaps
Okay.
It's problems. And if somebody is on drugs or alcohol, as long as it's safe, they will still test them. But they have had to turn some people away because they've shown up and clearly we're not in a state to be around others.
Okay.
But as long as it's not posing a threat to the group testing, that they will test you.
I'd say it's the mutant X gene. So that's what it is.
Exactly. Well, this test has been around a long time. So it used to be a person named James Randi. He was a magician, and then he spent the latter half of his life and career devoted to promoting skepticism, especially going after people like psychics and so on, because he knew what their tricks were. So he knew how to show what they were doing wasn't real. But he had $1 million challenge. Nobody got past the first test. After he passed away, this other group's taken on to $500,000 challenge. The money's really there. You can win it, and nobody's passed the test.
Well, I just think like at some point, maybe we're going to evolve to where, sure, like X-Men are real. Someone's going to have that gene. Then I don't know, they're shooting lightning bolts or whatever they're doing. So one day it'll be real, just like 100,000 years from now when we evolve. We're just coming up to the end of the time. I wanted to give you some time here to just say how people can find you and your work. I know MacEwan website.
Yep.
There's some stuff posted on there, so I'll put that link up. But anywhere else that you want to kind of put out there for people?
Yeah, check out my website. It's rodneyschmaltz.com. I offer some talks if anyone's interested. That's all there. It's an overview of my research, some of my media appearances. So if you'd like to learn more about what I do, that is the place to go.
Awesome. Man, fascinating stuff. And I was super curious about so much of this. So I was glad that we could get you in here and discuss this. And really appreciate the time. So,
all right, thanks.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.